Good afternoon, Trojan family. I'm Erica Maldonado Singh, Associate Director of USC Dornsife Alumni Relations. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. For those on Zoom, if you'd like to ask a question to any of our speakers, please make sure to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We want to make this conversation fun and engaging, so we'll also have the chat open, but please direct any questions to the Q&A box. If you have to leave today's discussion at any point, a recording will be available on our website on our career development page. It is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Catherine Shieh. Kat's pronouns are she, they. She is the Senior Program Manager of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Adler University in Chicago. She was previously an ethnic study teacher, emphasizing intersectionality and student-centered learning. Her anti-bias and anti-racism curricula have been piloted in the Los Angeles Unified School District and multiple charter schools across California. She's dedicated to social impact in various industries, specifically in anti-bias and anti-racism, ethnic studies, and DEI learning experiences. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science from USC Dornsife and urban planning from the Price School of Public Policy. Kat, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Erica. And I'm so excited for all of us to be able to talk about different types of careers and what it really means to transition. What are some of the highlights? What are some of the difficulties? So I really want to make sure that we have a lot of airtime for our panel here. I'm going to start out with Kevin Frank. As you can see, he's the shirt in the blue. He uses he, him pronouns. He is currently the Chief People Officer at Golden Hippo. They are a direct-to-consumer e-commerce company. And just to sell Golden Hippo a little bit, they won numerous awards that he's been a part of, recognizing as one of the best places to work, best company for work-life balance, for benefits, for compensation, and the like. He's got over 20 years of progressive and impactful HR and leadership experiences, resulting in high levels of employee engagement. And I know that that's certainly a challenge in sort of the post-pandemic world. How do we really be able to balance hybrid experiences? And so being able to tout high employee engagement, I think is an incredible feat. He was most recently recognized as OnCon Icon's Top 50 Award for his leadership in HR. He currently holds a master's degree in marriage, family, and child counseling from USC's Rossier School of Education and also has a PhD in organizational psychology. He's definitely the kind of person that you want to reach out to because he's had his career transitions in a variety of roles in HR as well as counseling. And he's going to be able to talk about that in detail throughout the panel. Our next person is B. Rarewala, and they use she, her pronouns. She is the Chief Strategy Officer of AC Martin. They are an architecture, planning, and research firm. She is in charge of facilitating key initiatives, investments, oversees business strategy, marketing, communications. So as you can tell, she's not busy at all. She has centered her 20-plus year career at the nexus of design thinking and business strategy with a passion for developing the next generation of talent, cultivating a culturally responsive sort of climate to both. She was most recently recognized as a finalist for the Los Angeles Times B2B Publishing 2023 Inspirational Women Forum and Leadership Awards. Her connection to USC is a long list. She not only has a bachelor's degree in economics from USC Dornsife, but she is also on the USC Dornsife Economics Leadership Council and the Women in Economics Committee and several industry boards, including the executive committee of the USC Architecture Guild Board. If you want to think about her transitions and think about reaching out to B, we're looking at business design and architecture career transitions. So Kevin B, so excited to be able to talk to you all about this really, really exciting topic, especially in this day and age where career transitions are becoming a little bit more normalized, right? And also this means that we are actually embracing people who've had a variety of different experiences. So let's actually start out with yours. B, if you don't mind starting out, and then Kevin, I'd love to get your take on this too. Obviously, I've explicitly stated that you all have had career transitions. What was unexpected in those transitions and in your career journey? B, can you start us out?
Sure. I think, several things. First, it's really weird to think I started in design then went into economics, totally pivoted my degree change, and then said, no, but I know I'm not going to be in the iBanking role or finance, and always knew I'd be in a creative industry. So I sought that out from the get-go in my very first job, where I wanted to kind of have this, have my design ability still reinforced, but also support my kind of love of business and business development. And so I found that in a design firm, and I didn't think that I would go anywhere else but be in these like traditional design role where I could be on a project and do design work for clients. And then I was actually poached by a client, and that brought me into the architecture space, which I've always loved the built environment, but I had no idea I would land in such a technical, professional service driven world. So I think that kind of really surprised me. And I think, if there's advice to be given about that unexpected turn is, be open to opportunities, right? You don't know where your career is going to lead you. And so kind of seizing that and, embracing it and taking the ride is really an important piece of, that unexpected adventure.
That's awesome. And I know that that's always really easy to think about, but then to actually put that into reality, it can be quite the journey. So thanks for really being able to highlight that. Kevin, what do you want to tell us about your unexpected career journeys?
Well, I can tell you, Kat, I certainly didn't grow up thinking I'm going to be in HR. That's exactly what I want to do with my life. I didn't even know about HR growing up. And I wanted to be a fireman. I wanted to be an FBI agent. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I had all these big dreams. And what I kind of learned through the process is you got to focus on what you're talented at, what you're really good at, and what you enjoy. And if you can couple what your strengths are with what your passions are, you can find that career that makes you feel fulfilled. And, early on, I thought leveraging psychology to go in counseling was the path for me. I realized that it didn't really allow me to be as creative as I'd like to be, work with teams as much as I'd like to. And it wasn't until speaking with a professor of mine did she open up the idea of, well, you have psychology in the workplace as well. And I'm like, you do? Where do you have that? And she introduced me to human resource management, and I have never looked back. And recognizing that I could use a subject matter that I was very passionate about, that being psychology, in a form that I had no idea I could use it in the workplace, in HR management. It was a perfect marriage for me, and it's been a great journey since.
Something that really resonated with me as you were talking is, being able to have that sort of autonomy and being creative. That definitely resonates with me. I used to work in Congress, and as you can probably imagine, that's not necessarily a place where you can be as creative as you'd like to be. Hence my own career transitions as well. Both of you talked a little bit about sort of like getting poached, someone talking to you, recruiting you somewhere. This is the part that I find a little bit challenging, right? Because people tell you, go get a mentor, go network. But to be quite frank with you, even though, as I mentioned in the beginning of this, we're able to be a lot more open to folks who are transitioning in different careers, but being able to relate to people in different industries, being able to find people who understand that we have different talents. How in the world do you navigate networking, and how do you find mentors when you have a mind that sort of bleeds into different disciplines? Kevin, can you start us off with that?
Yeah, and I could share, Kat, I've worked in a variety of different industries, from retail to entertainment to software, internet, startups, big global companies, etc. I've always taken a very humanistic approach in how I stepped into any industry, any job. And I think being what I hope, how I was experienced as being authentic and genuine, connecting with people at the human level, because we're all humans, regardless of where you go, right? That is the one constant. And if you can connect with people on that human level, being your true self, being your authentic self, looking for commonalities, being honest and open, I have found that, that resonates with many people, not everybody perhaps, but with the right people that I care to connect with. And that ability to connect at that human level has really helped me in my career and in doing what I do in HR.
I think that's such an interesting piece of, truth, right? We're all people. And something you said earlier too is, lean into your passions, right? I think, Kevin, like those 2 points are so true in how you kind of build and cultivate your network. I think, we were talking about this offline, but the Trojan family is something I really believe in. I think it's such an important piece of, the academic experience that is intangible. You don't really know how strong that network is. And if you lean in, you have this common experience, and to leverage that via LinkedIn, it's so intimidating to like ping someone and say like, I don't know you at all, but you seem interesting. Hey, do you have a minute? But they're a Trojan, you share that common bond. It's a really nice icebreaker and a way to kind of just neutralize, right? And then you can explore the different paths. Hey, I'm interested in this industry, or I'm interested in changing my career in this way, and you might help me get there. Could we spend 5 minutes talking about it? I think it's been a really interesting thing for me, from not only having really strong mentors, but now mentoring lots of current students, former students, to see that kind of evolution, right? Like that network grows both ways. You learn from your proteges, you learn from your mentors, but ultimately it's that human connection, it's that relationship building, and it doesn't have to be daunting or transactional if you're really coming from that authentic, passionate place. So Kevin, what you said, it really resonates with me.
Thank you, B. And I appreciate that. You really can't be a passive writer in your career. You have to take the steering wheel. You've got to get control of it, and you can't just sit and wait for it to come to you. You got to meet it. You got to go out and get it. And that is building relationships, that is connecting with people, that is being inquisitive, it's learning from others, and being very open-minded. And when you can be open-minded, all new kinds of opportunities can come your way.
Truly, and it's something that kind of in my own career I've seen. I mean, I except for my very first job, it's been really opportunistic. It's been through poaching or recruitment. It's always been presented to me. I kind of wasn't necessarily seeking it. And these, path changes from, being a designer to doing more of the business side to communications to marketing. I've held so many different roles, and they've all been these opportunities. I kind of just said, sure. And I leaned in and said, why not? Like, there's a curiosity, like I love learning and growing in that way. So I think being open too, I mean, yes, seize it. Like if you want to change, like absolutely do that. But also maybe you're not thinking of changing, and maybe something comes to you and you're like, hey, why not? Like lean into those experiences. It might not be the right fit, but at least explore and test. And one thing I always say is try to take an interview every year. If you may not be at all interested in leaving your job, but it's nice to see what the competition's doing. It's nice to see what's out there. Keeps your skills alive. It keeps your network growing. So that's something that I tend to just do. It's like, let's see what's out there.
I absolutely love that, right? And even you talking about sort of like freshening up your interview skills or leaning into opportunities, it really goes back to, Kevin, what you were saying about you didn't grow up thinking you were going to be an HR professional. That's not what you drew in kindergarten class, right? And I can't help but feel like, B, you definitely sold the Trojan family. So I know that that's something you want to talk about. So I want to skip over to that question. Besides the Trojan network, what did USC offer that other institutions or experiences don't have to offer in regards to helping you with that sort of like career exploration and transition? B, do you want to start us out? And then
Sure.
Kevin, I want to hear what you have to say too.
It's funny because I don't think I knew any of this while I was a student there, and seeing kind of the generations advance and how much more sophisticated they are for the students that are currently there. It's just so inspiring. Like they're so much better than I was at that age. And to see kind of the resources, right? There's so many tools. There's career counseling, there's the exposure of like the voices and perspectives programs, like those programming things, like broaden your horizons, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so leaning into new avenues, new industries, new types of people, like all of that can help shape what path you're on, and might, give you kind of like what Kevin said, like he didn't know HR existed. I didn't know there was a role called Chief Strategy Officer. I think there probably wasn't actually when I went to school, but it's like you don't know where you're going to wind up. And I actually had this really amazing experience while I was at SC through the School of Architecture. Like I wasn't a part of that school, but they had a really amazing architect speak at Bovard. And I was like, wow, I'm really curious about that. And so, fast forward, now I've spent 20 years in the architecture world, more than that. And who would have thought, that sparked a little interest that said, I am curious about this. So I think that exposure, the scale of the school, like the university at large, that it can show you so much more. I think the connection to the community too, programs like Joint Educational Project JEP is like such an incredible resource of like giving back. And I think those ways of mentorship, right, and fostering like the connection to the youth is very relatable to your own career transition of you're learning from people below and above you. It's hard to see it at the time, but as you reflect back, you're like, all those skills can completely translate to like how I interview and how I interact with people and how I shape my own career path.
And if I can piggyback off of that, I am forever grateful for the professor that I mentioned earlier. She was at USC. I was in the School of Education getting my MFCC, and she's the one that introduced me to this whole new discipline of organizational psychology that later connected me with HR management. And it was her really seemingly caring and wanting to understand how she could help me. And I feel forever grateful for that professor, because it put me on a path that led me to where I am today. And I feel like I'm at a place now, as I think you were describing, Dee, where I want to give back, where I want to help those that were at the beginning of that journey I was on so long ago. And I do that. I'm on the advisory board for the USC Master's Program of Applied Psychology. And I've taken on interns for a number of years from that program and from SC, because I know these are smart, bright, talented individuals. And I am looking for another intern for the fall, or spring, excuse me. And it's my way of giving back. And then anytime someone wants to talk about their career and just be a sounding board, and I love doing that. I love being able to give back because I know it's very challenging. It's scary. It's intimidating. You feel like if you make a decision, you're stuck, but you're not. You're not stuck. You may need to take a step backwards to take 2 steps forward, but that's okay. You're never stuck.
Yeah, and I think, Kevin, what you touched on, it's like the people too. It's yes, I serve on a lot of boards at SC as well. And, there's a student engagement on all of the boards that I'm on. Economic Leadership Council, there's a student group. There's with the Architecture Guild, students are members immediately. Like lean into all those organizations. I think that's another, real caveat and carrot for, USC's camp, that they do these things that are not bridging the gap between industry and academia really nicely, so that you have that exposure. And then, like you said, Kevin, if it wasn't for a professor, I wouldn't have been an economics major. I mean, I am not a math-minded person, to be perfectly honest. Like big picture vision strategy, yes. Numbers, no. Yet I graduated with an economics degree because, a professor kind of changed my mind that like, hey, this is something you don't know, and it's very applicable, that can help you in any career you take on. And that foresight to say like, no matter what industry, no matter, what your role is, this will help you, couldn't have been more true. And it really has, that foundational understanding of the qualitative and quantitative bend of how you think about things and analyze things has served me well, even though I know I'm a creative. I know I'm a person, like that's my heart, that's my strength, but it has helped broaden my viewpoint and my approach and my work. So professors go a long way.
And B, I think you really hit the nail on the head, right? That there's this crossing of industry and academia that I quite frankly do not see to the same extent than other higher ed institutions, let alone tier R1 universities, right? And I think about how often as you know, I was a teacher for a number of years, how many times I would tell students, if you end up at a college town, just know that you will be, very consciously sheltered in certain ways, versus if you do go to a university like USC, that is really housed in a city and chooses not to be separated from the city, right? And so that kind of exposure, and then even for the professors and their perspectives, to what degree does that become part of their white ivory tower, or do they really do the professors get to integrate themselves into industry, right? And what you both are talking about was definitely to some degree my experience too. I think it's really important to highlight that, even with the Trojan Network, whether you absolutely loved your USC experience, or even you've had more mixed reviews, I've noticed both approaches can really build relationships. I think, again, when you're a university in a city, you kind of either love it or hate it. And sometimes that can really, really build some good bonds there for sure. Both of you talked throughout this time that we've had together about networking, being open and honest. We didn't really get to touch upon this before, but I do want to ask, how in the world are you supposed to network and build relationships, let alone in like career transitions? How do you build all these relationships if you're not an extrovert? If you feel like your social skills, you get kind of self-conscious because maybe English isn't your first language, or you're an immigrant, or you have apparent disabilities, right? Like there's so many folks that even the idea of networking, as much as USC pushes it, it can still be really, really daunting and try to get noticed by people. Do either of you have any responses? Do either of you have any responses to this concern, so to say?
So I can just
Kevin, do you want to start out to see if you have anything?
Sure. First, I think I would say is be prepared to step out of your comfort zone. That's how you grow. That's how you meet new opportunities or learn about new opportunities. Is you can't stay in your own little bubble. You have to push yourself, and that's not always easy. And recognize that most people feel the same exact way as you, even if you don't see it or notice it. They're feeling it inside. You need not go to a giant, 1,000-person conference or something like that. You can go to a very small kind of networking event at a local restaurant. There's all kinds of events that are occurring from small to large, from subject matters that you might be an expert in, to something you don't even know anything about. Start with the small, start with something you're more familiar with, build that muscle. And you need not go alone. Find a partner to go with to these events. And that's how you can kind of step into it. And then over time, the more you apply yourself, the easier it gets, more comfortable it gets. And you just got to push yourself.
Thanks for reminding us that there's not just one way to network. So I appreciate that a lot. B, you definitely sounded excited to answer this question.
Well, I just, working in architecture and engineering is something that these are technical people, right? I've worked with them for a long time, and I wouldn't say one of them is naturally an extrovert. It's just not who they are. But it's like, I think it goes back to something we talked about earlier about, knowing who you are and knowing what your passion is. If you are really passionate about a subject or curious about something else, but what you can contribute to that conversation, I think it makes it easier. Like rely on the confidence of what you know about yourself and who you are. And, as Kevin said, your authentic self, like really helps sell yourself. It's like, you don't have to be everything to everyone, just be who you are and build the commonalities, find those threads, ask a lot of questions. Then you don't have to talk about yourself either. I think, being curious is much easier than putting yourself out there, right? There's a difference. If you're trying to sell yourself, it's a really hard thing to do because no matter how confident you are, and I find myself to be a confident person, like talking about yourself is really awkward. And we were talking about this earlier, like I don't like being on screen. I'm not a person who likes to be in front of the camera. So I know that about myself, but I also know I love to engage with people and ask questions. So it's like if you can then flip it and find a comfort zone, I think it's a much easier way to and go to those events that Kevin's talking about, like start your smaller scale, lean in and just say, okay, I like this subject. I'm going to learn more. Let me ask questions. Then it puts the other person, in a position to then ask questions back, and it becomes more conversational and much more intimate. And I think when you're at a smaller scale and there's that intimacy, it's not so overwhelming. I was at an event last night where until later in the evening, I didn't know anyone. And I still was like, wow, this is like all these people I don't know. It was very overwhelming. And, I made nice chit chat, but it was daunting no matter how many years you network. It can be overwhelming.
Very much so. I appreciate the practical tip that you have for us. So for those of you in the audience, I hope you really were able to sort of put a pin on that for advice that you can really be able to apply moving forward. B, you definitely used a key word that I am pinning for myself. You used the word confidence. And for both of you to talk about leaning in, for both of you talking about getting uncomfortable, it kind of feels like your confidence can get really shredded, right? In all of that process of trying to build relationships, let alone sort of jump into a new pool, so to say, right? Like, what helped you gain the confidence to be able to feel like you're capable of being able to hop around? Or maybe you just have imposter syndrome and have just had 30 years of being able to hide your imposter syndrome. Kevin, can you tell us where you're at?
Absolutely, Kat. And let me start off by saying I've had imposter syndrome my entire career. Every new job, every new level, every new promotion you get to, you question, hey, am I right for this? Am I ready for this? Did they make the right decision? I really, truly think imposter syndrome is normal. It is a normal part of life. I think only few folks may live their life without ever experiencing it, but it is normal. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it helps keep you on your toes. It keeps, that gives you that edge. It keeps you learning, not complacent. You have that motivation to try to master and get better and improve. And so I think it's okay. Even today, as Chief People Officer, when I stepped into this role, this was the first time I hit that C-level suite title. And from time to time, it comes back and rears its ugly face at me. And that's normal. And when I face it, I have to kind of do some self-talking and remind myself I got here for a reason. People saw something inside of me. I know I can do this. What I don't know, I'll learn, I'll apply myself, I'll get better. I need not be the expert on everything. It's okay to be vulnerable too, to be humble and say you don't know something, but not just sit idle and do nothing about it. You got to try to improve and work on it. And so, I think, Kat, I just wanted to underscore and recognize it is normal to have imposter syndrome throughout your career.
Kevin, someone else also told me that imposter syndrome is real. California California Supreme Court Justice Goodwin Liu also said the same thing. It is a reality in the world that we live in, and you don't have a choice but to work with it and work through it, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that, for him and for I, who are trying to figure out how to do social impact, right? If you don't move through your imposter syndrome, who else are you holding back? Right. And I'm sure, as someone who has been in a variety of different positions in HR, trying to help people, that must resonate with you. So I appreciate that. B, did you want to respond at all to how to gain that confidence or figure out the imposter syndrome thing?
Yeah, I think what Kevin said is really interesting, because I think if you can admit what you don't know, that's actually a sign of massive confidence. I think I position confidence in like kind of a different way where it's like, yes, I think we've all struggled with everything that Kevin has talked about, but as someone who, is a minority woman in LA is a very accepting place, but still the architecture industry, the design space it's not diverse at all. It's growing and it's getting better, but it's small percentages still. And so I've thought out companies that show diversity, that feel supportive for me, and I know will hold space for me. And that's been intentional. And even though I have been recruited to certain positions, when I'm making decisions between two companies, I'm like, no, this one feels right because I can see myself here at the table and they want me there. You have to remind yourself you got that job, right? Like if you're there, yes, you might have doubts like, why did they hire me? But it's like, you're there, like own that, find that, and center yourself around that, like build your confidence through those, even if it's a micro victory, like you're there, have that faith in yourself, know your strengths, know what you're good at, and admit where you're not. And I think always surround yourself with the best people, right? Find the people that inspire you or can challenge you, push you. I think don't be safe with your group of peers, right? Not the ones who just will always support you. It's good to have some natural conflict. It builds your confidence to be challenged and, consider different viewpoints. I think the best thing I've ever done as I've kind of ascended in my career is, man, my team, they are so much smarter and better than me, right? Like that is like, I can lean on them and grow and see the talent that they have and support them, and it's like, ultimately it comes back to me, like I pick these people, they're such rock stars, they could all do what I'm doing, maybe like, I can give them the sage advice, but they're all so great. And so I think starting to shape that, and it goes back to that network, right? Like lean in on the people around you, be tested by them, push and pull, have some healthy tension, because I think that's how you combat some of the imposter syndrome. You build your confidence. It's a nice organic way too to like kind of go back. I think what Kevin said, that human side, like humans need some of that. You become very bored and stagnant if you just are all like-minded and support, oh yeah, you're doing a great job, like you won't really know your litmus, right? So I think having that kind of counteraction, right, in your world is a healthy thing to keep testing you and pushing you forward.
Thank you for that. I want to switch gears a little bit and really be able to focus on the curiosities from the audience. Kevin, I feel like you have a lot of experience in helping someone sort of go through this. Do you have any advice on getting into a position that it fits your experience level, even when your resume doesn't quite reflect this?
Yes, I will say what I'd like to speak to is transferable skills. Two of my best employees on my team, one is a recruiting manager and one leads our learning and development group, do not have the traditional path that you'd see that normally takes people to those roles. One was teaching in South America to indigenous tribes and in a variety of other kind of non-traditional roles. But when I looked at her resume, what I saw is someone who can work with diversity and diverse audiences, someone who can stand up on their own feet and exude strength and knowledge, one who can be agile and flexible. And those were like important transferable skills as I was looking for my L&D role at the time. And I trusted in her, and she's been promoted twice over just within a couple of years. The other one of my recruiting managers was in the retail world, and she was a regional manager of a bunch of retail stores. And in my mind, she's got so many different employees. She's regularly trying to staff for these roles. This wasn't a corporate recruiter that I normally look for, but I saw someone who could persevere in a very challenging environment and who clearly sold herself to me in the interview process. But it was all transferable skills. Right now, she's one of our best recruiters and leads part of the team. And so if you're looking to make a shift, you have to be prepared, I think, sometimes to step backwards. You may not be able to come in at the level you're at today in a different career. You might have to step backwards. But again, and I've done that a lot in my own world. In HR, I started off in training and development, and I moved into employee relations, and then I was an HR business partner. And sometimes I went up in salary, sometimes I went back in salary, sometimes I went up in level, sometimes I went back. But it got me to where I am today. And so you have to be okay with that. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices, but you have to look for what are the transferable skills? What are the core skills that I need to be successful in this role? And that, I think, is sometimes even harder. It's easier to find, I think, someone with the right technical skills. Oh yeah, I've recruited for a number of years, or I did training and development, or I was an engineer or a marketer. But to be successful on my team, in my company, in our company culture, in our industry, you need to have these particular values, X, Y, and Z. And if you can demonstrate, you exude those, you demonstrate those, you live by those, that can be harder to find. And that's what it will take, I think, to be successful in certain roles.
Thank you for that. And really being able to hear about that from an HR professional, and from your variety of different experiences, I think that can give a lot of people some tangible hope. What I'm really hearing from you, Kevin, is like, being able to tell your story and being able to tell your skills in a way that helps other people maybe understand, right? And then the second thing that I'm hearing from you, is sort of this practical tip of, it's not necessarily about like the end result of your skills, but sort of like your ability to do things, right? So it's not necessarily about like I know how to work GIS, these are my skills, but it's like, I have the ability to persevere. I have the ability to learn fast, right? And those kinds of things, I know, at least for myself, that's what gives me confidence. I don't necessarily know like all the updated tech, but I'm really good at learning it, right? So I very much appreciate that, Kevin.
I think too, just to lean in on the conversation, there's a way to also kind of build case studies, and it goes to that transferable skill that Kevin's talking about. But like, how is a situation that you've had in your current role or a previous role kind of relating to this thing that they're trying to solve, right? So if it doesn't have to be apples to apples, but you're showing how your skill set or an experience then translates to this. And I'm a big fan of customizing. Like if you're doing something with a resume, I've been fortunate where I've kind of had more conversational recruitment in my life, but shape your resume in a way that story tells. It's really much better to say, like, if I'm looking for XYZ and you don't have exactly XYZ, but you can show how what you've done on another job relates to X, Y, and Z, they'll make those connections. And I know it's a little bit hard with algorithms on online resumes, so weave the words in so it still gets the algorithm going. But I really believe in storytelling. I think that's a lost art sometimes. Like the experiences you have throughout life. I mean, I've coached some women that have left the workforce and come back post raising their kids in this way. It's like, you have so many skills that you have done as a head of household, as a mother, that, like, my goodness, like multitasking, absolute demands, time management, all of those things can be really actually funny quips that show your personality, that show, your perseverance, and absolutely directly relate to, man, I need someone who can handle like 5 deadlines at once. Well, you've got multiple kids. Like, I have one and I struggle. So, it's like those types of stories really resonate, show your personality, show who you are, authentically. And you don't have to worry as much about the technical skills, because you can say, hey, I've always been a high performer when it comes to like learning these skills, or, like Kat said, like, I'm a technophile, I could do it, like, I may not know it right now, but I know I can. So I think making it relatable, that past experience really helps.
Thank you for that. And thanks for really being able to emphasize sort of the storytelling too. I know I can say for myself, as someone who's been in like politics and teaching and law and civil rights and universities, right? Like, I can say, at least for myself, the storytelling part is really hard initially, and then it gets easier over time. Mm-hmm. Definitely gets easier over time. So I can definitely attest to that. You talked a lot about resume, B. So I got to ask you, Is it a good idea to put all your DEI trainings on your resume?
I don't put everything on my resume. I have a very, again, once you get to kind of, I guess, that over 20-year career, you start to have these like endless resumes of facts and things. And so I actually have a very abridged one, but I think when you're, in relation to a career change, when you're trying to show that change, if it's a DEI training, if it's something that relates to, hey, I want to be at a company that values DEI, that like, Jedi is at the front, this is part of their company culture. I want to show that I am an employee for them. Absolutely put it down. If you're working at a company that maybe, you look at their website and you do the research on them and that is not like really permeating through, maybe you touch on it and you touch on it in a way that like, hey, I've gone through this, I can work with people, I'm aware, and you spin it that it kind of fits in their culture. But I think you have to be a meter, right? You have to be a meter of what the job you're applying for is, look at what they're looking for, and then make your skills and your trainings and everything relatable. Because I think you could put too much in and you're like, no one's going to read it, but you could put a lot of things in that are very applicable and transferable, back to Kevin's point, and make those connections. So I would say it really depends. It depends on what you're going for.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on like how specific you want to be, right?
Exactly.
At this point, my resume, I say that I'm industry agnostic. Maybe Kevin only wants to be HR for engineering firms, right? We get to decide that for ourselves. And thank you for reminding us that we have that kind of agency. Speaking of agency, Kevin, I want to ask you, is there more information that you'd like to share with us about transitioning to online careers or work from home options? That was a question from the audience.
Well, thankfully, many industries and many careers offer that option. I think I would need a little bit more information from this individual, but you would, I think what we were talking about earlier, what Bea was talking about, you need to do the research and study what kind of policies, what kind of culture does the company subscribe to, and you can discover that typically on their website. They will be clear if a hybrid or remote workforce is something they are okay with, and if that's what you're looking for, you gotta do the research for that. It is different working online than it is working in person. I think you have to work that much harder to build those connections, to build a rapport, to establish that trust with people. I think that's a lot easier to do in person. So you just need to be prepared for that. You can also feel perhaps a little bit more isolated. So you need to make sure you have all the right technology that keeps you connected with your groups, with interest groups, perhaps at your company, and to build those relationships. And so I'm not sure I'm really answering the question. I'm acknowledging that working remotely versus working in person is a different experience. Thankfully, a lot of companies to attract top talent have moved, and have remained since COVID, a hybrid or remote workplace. Some of the bigger tech companies are asking people to come back, and they can because they're huge, and a lot of people want to work for those types of companies. But many of the others, to keep that competitive edge, offer that hybrid or remote option as part of their, benefits and employee value proposition, if you will. And so there's a lot of options out there. You just got to do your homework.
Yeah, and in your current role, sorry, Kat, you can talk to your employer. I mean, if there's not a formal policy, like you can approach them. I think we had someone who moved. We're very much a regional California firm that I'm in. And so it was nice to see that someone we really valued as an employee, his wife got an opportunity in Massachusetts, and they moved to Massachusetts, and we still kept him on. And we made this exception, even though for us, it's hard with payroll, and there's just a lot of things that go along with that, but we value him as an employee, and we want him to be retained. So we made that, workaround for him. And so I think, you can ask, that's the worst they can say is no, right? But you can even be in your current situation and just see, if that's something you want to transition to. I think, Kevin's points are really true. It's harder to build community, and the real network of your peers. It can be a challenge in a remote setting. My previous firm, I worked through all of COVID, remote, and we were a global firm. So I never met some of my colleagues ever in person, and we did build a great rapport, but, know that you have to put in the work. Like Kevin said, I think it's a really good point to kind of meter, the different experience that online only is.
The fact that both of you sound like you are, kind of embracing remote work reminds me that I should probably move back to California. I wanted to ask so both of you have talked about sort of like work cultures given that previous question. So I want to ask you both, what kinds of people, cultures, and organizations do you notice that you gravitate towards? B, can we start with you?
Yeah. So I really, obviously, design is the driver. If design isn't one of the first things that is mentioned on the website, is not part of their vision, it's probably not a right fit for me. And you'd say like, oh, well, everything in architecture is kind of design. That's not true. There's a lot of technical architects and a lack of creativity in some, and I need a creative space for me to thrive. And so that is something that holds true to me. Also diversity, like for me, seeing leadership that is not exactly all looking the same. I don't want a homogeneous pair of, peers. I really want that diversity of thought, diversity of experience. And for me, that starts at the top, right? I think when I look at a website, I want to go straight to that leadership section and know that, there's not another one of me there. I want to be the only me, and I want everybody else to be slightly different and have a different thought process. So for me, those are two big drivers. I think, then it's hard to sometimes like capture culture when you're not there yet, right? So how do you eke that out? Like I like to try to really find people that work there and talk to as many people who have worked there. Why don't you work there? If they have clients, depending on, I've always been in a service industry. What do the clients say about them? Like, I want to know that this is a place that has a strong core vision and values. Like that resonates with me. Some people, they want more of like the paycheck progression, formality, and that's fine too. But for me, what makes me thrive is knowing that they're committed to their people, they're committed to their clients, and that they have a strong point of view, and they have a really supportive, ethical point of view too, that they're doing the right thing. I think buzzwords like ESG and CSR, corporate social responsibility, and how they care about the environment and social governance, those really resonate with me. I think it took a long time for the built environment to admit they're like the biggest polluters in the world. So seeing that sea change, I want to be a part of the company that wants, I want to be a part of a company that wants to be proactive in that change.
Who do you gravitate towards, Kevin?
Yeah, I love this question, Kat. And, what comes to mind first is where you do it is just as important, if not more important, than what you do. And what I mean by that is exactly what B was describing, understanding the company culture, the value set, the leadership, their vision and mission, their treatment of employees, what they stand for, what the business does. That's so important. And when I started off my career, those were things that weren't always talked about. It was more about, what you do in the job, but not necessarily where you do it. And now I have the benefit of 20 years to look back at. Kind of the journey I took was really trying to find my community, my home, because you're spending more time in the workplace than anywhere else. So you want to feel like you belong. You want to feel like you're part of something that your values are aligned with. And so, what I have learned from, again, big global companies, corporate structured companies, to small little startups and everything in between, what I truly love is more of the informal, casual, humanistic, where everybody's kind of treated equally. B, as you spoke about diversity, making sure there's all types of people. I've my biggest passion in the world is traveling the world. I think I've backpacked to like over 35, 40 countries around the world, and learning from different people, meeting different people, seeing different cultures, and being able to have that around me every day in the workplace. It is not only fun, it is real life, and it also helps make that company stronger. Diversity, I think we all know in research now, helps bring forward stronger, more productive, more successful companies. And so I like the smaller scale where you get to know each other. You know each other by name, not a number, or you're that role, or you're that title, or you're part of this department. You're B, you're Kat, you're Kevin, you're Erica, etc. And so you need to look for a company. Again, I think even more important than the actual job itself, where you feel like you can find yourself comfortably in, where you feel like you're contributing to a greater good, especially in today's age through COVID and where we're at today as a world. You want to be a part of something that is meaningful for you. And so learning what that is for you, trying to understand that is very critical. That's what you should focus on first, those important values and qualities. And then when you're interviewing and doing your homework, you should be asking questions around that to make sure it's the right place for you. Because remember, you're not just being interviewed, you are interviewing them. It is a two-way street. You want to make sure it is the right fit for you. Do not settle. Now, that's easy for me to say in the seat I'm in today. I know sometimes you have to settle. And look, I've done that in my career. I've taken jobs that, I knew probably was not, the most exciting or best place for me, but I knew it was a stepping stone to get to that next place. And I found it. So it was a journey, and I hope you take these bits of these nuggets and apply it to your own journeys.
I think, can I just pick on one thing, Kevin, that you just said that was really important to me is, testing out those places that may not be a fit too, because you could be surprised by it. I learned from being at a very large 40,000 person global publicly traded firm that that's not the best place for me. But I learned so much, so many skills from being at that firm, and a lot of value. And they did hit the criteria. They were super into CSR. They had amazing supportive programs from an HR and benefits perspective. So they were doing the right things and they were saying the right things. But I realized I like a more intimate company. So, eventually I know it's kind of pivot away from there, but don't be afraid of kind of also testing that. I think that was such a great thing you said, because you don't know, sometimes by being in that space, you pick up a lot of skills that you might not have, so while those core values of what you believe in and what you want to gravitate towards, because that's so important, you will feel fulfilled that way. Also, don't be afraid to say well, this doesn't feel maybe like the best fit, but there's an opportunity that seems exciting. Also explore that, you can, it's okay, because it might lead to some great skill building or great relationships. I have a great network from that company, and it's a global one. Like Kim said, I love those people from all these different countries. So there's always benefits to be had.
Yeah, I like to say, B, there is an absolute lesson in everything in life.
So true.
You have to take a moment and pause sometimes to recognize what that lesson is. And it may not be an exciting lesson, but there's a learning there, and you can apply it to, where you go next.
Very much so. The reason why I asked the culture fit question is because I think this very much leads to the next question that I have, right? There are quite a few people in this audience who've talked a lot about rejections or not even knowing where to start. So these particular folks, I'm sort of condensing this question together. I've really struggled transitioning from being in one industry, in this particular case, it's education. I've really struggled, transitioning from one industry that I've been at for decades to a new career as a mid-career professional. It's really disheartening to continue, to get a no response, to get a no as a response. It turns into, what kind of tips are there? I don't even have a circle of influence to start with. Do I need to get all these different certifications? It's a big question. How do you go about all this?
It's very tough. I let me acknowledge that. It is not easy, but you cannot give up. You got to take that perhaps sometimes that negative energy that comes from so many rejections and use it to your advantage. Take that energy and turn it into something positive. And I think what we talked a lot about earlier is the network. You've got to tap your network. Because, and then I'll tell you, overseeing our recruiting team, we get flooded with hundreds and thousands of resumes, And your typical recruiter will give seconds to just review a resume and look for that, something in that resume that sparks, hey, this is worthwhile. And so you've got to tap your network, talk to people every time you're out. You're at a cocktail party, you're at a friend's house, you're meeting someone new, you're in some kind of club, whatever. Get to know each other, learn what they do, and that becomes your network. And LinkedIn can become your best friend. Build that network there as well, and see what connections your connections have, because they can make introductions. And don't be bashful to ask for help. You've got to ask for help. It takes courage to ask for help, and you should be doing that. That's so important. So I don't want to tell you to give up. Do not give up. But I'm also not going to tell you it's going to be an easy journey. It may not be, but building that network is critical. Using the tools like the LinkedIn are critical. Every opportunity you have in life, look for where you can make that connection.
I couldn't agree more. Like everything Kevin said is so true. I think, I'm a big networker. I think the relationship building, the most fundamental thing, just inquiring more. Every person you meet is a person to gain so many more people from. I think that's the thing to think about. It's not just that one-to-one relationship. It's like they know lots of people. And I think as you look at LinkedIn and you look at the Trojan network again, it's a huge network, right? There's thousands and thousands of alumni. And almost every time I go on LinkedIn, it's like, that's our common bond is USC. Like there's so many people. And, I had someone from Washington State reach out. He was younger. He's about 10 years younger than me. He's in construction. And he's like, hey, I really want to get back to California. And I saw that you have these things, two things in common. Do you have 5 minutes to just have like a coffee chat virtually? I said, absolutely. It's like, and it's turned out to be such a fruitful relationship because now we're doing work in Washington. And I'm like, hey, I need to lean on you. Can you introduce me to these people? And he's like, come to this conference with me. So and it's like, I wouldn't have thought someone, almost a decade younger would have like such impact from one LinkedIn conversation. And really he was reaching out to me for help. So I think you have to like really lean into that network, and every person, every friend, every family member, like mind them. It's okay. They care about you, and it can be daunting, and you don't want to feel like you're being tiring to them, like asking again, but like you have to be persistent, right? I think that is something that if you really want something, if you want this career change and you know what you want and you know where you want to go, find the people who can get you there. The LinkedIn shows you how many steps it is to get to that company. Mind those steps, and find organizations that maybe, hey, let's say like Disney, I really want to work at Disney. Disney's sponsoring this event. I'm going to go to this event. I'm going to lean in and volunteer here because there's going to be some people from Disney. I can talk to them. And then I have something to put on my resume, like volunteered at this event. It was so exciting to see Disney people there. Like, I think you have to be really intentional about the connections you make, because it will help sell you, right, with stories, right, going back to that story perspective, but it helps you grow your network. And even if it doesn't directly relate right to that job you want, inevitably those relationships will take you somewhere in time. And so I think don't be disheartened by that rejection. Don't be disheartened it's taking a little bit longer than you want it to, because I think it will be positive in the end.
I feel like both of you really talked a lot about persistence and relationships at the very close of this webinar. So I really want to surprise everybody by saying this is also kind of like a networking event that you just attended, right? And so speaking of expanding your network, speaking of that persistence, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that it is added to the chat in the webinar are LinkedIn profiles. And so this is literally widening your network. So I just want to say, like, on behalf of Kevin and B, we're ready to talk to you. I know that we didn't get to address every question, but we want to be 3 people who are with you every step of the way. And so with all that said, I just want to say thank you all so much for attending. Kevin, B, thank you so much for your expertise and to be able to talk about your experiences. And I wish you all the very best.
Thanks, everyone.